Well, Slava was a real human being. He was a wonderful person. And the first time I met him, his eyes they communicated something a lot more than just warmth and caring. There was a real genius there. And I found there were a couple of parts of him, his musical genius, that I discovered at various times during our years together. And one of them is Slava fast, just about Slava and playing pieces that were very technically challenging and very difficult. We were playing an overture and as an encore. It's the overture to Ruslan and Lyudmila by Glinka. And it's a very fast piece, just ordinarily. That's bum, 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 so it has a lot of runs in it. Slava began the rehearsal, and Bill Steck, then the concertmaster of the orchestra, put down his violin. And Slava said, what? Why do you put your violin down? And Bill said, Slava, this is too fast. Slava put his baton down on the podium and addressed the orchestra. And he said, my dear friends, my dear colleagues, this is true. This is a little bit too fast for this piece. It's a beautiful piece, and I don't understand why it has gotten faster and faster. It seems now people play it as an encore, and they play it even faster, and it has become almost a race. Then he picked up his baton and he said, but if it's a race, we must win. And he started off faster than ever. All of us were, of course, laughing at this idea, but it wasn't just a technical thing. It was a showpiece for the orchestra, and he felt it was very important for us to play just as fast and faster than anybody had played the piece. On the other hand, I remember playing a performance. Well, you spoke to my colleague Jane Stewart at some point during these interviews, and it involves her, actually. She and a trombonist in the orchestra at the time, John Hewling, and I would get together at some point during a tour just to have drinks together and talk about our lives and also about how the orchestra was playing on the tour. And in one tour, it just happened that Jane was rotated off of the Schubert Unfinished Symphony, and I was playing. And we were playing the first movement of that at such a slow tempo that I just found it very difficult to play. If you can imagine the calisthenics that we used to do when we were in high school, holding your arms out, just hold out your arms for 6 or 7 minutes and you get very tired. Well, it's the same sort of thing for musicians. When we have to hold our arms up for a very long time in a very slow piece, it can be very tiring. And that was the way it was for all of us playing the Schubert. And we felt it was just too slow. At this little get-together after the concert and this tour, I mentioned this to Jane and to John. Well, Jane had been rotated off of that piece, and she was out in the audience listening. And she said, well, I'm sorry to disagree with you, but that was just the most beautiful, wrenching performance of the Schubert that I had ever heard. Oh, okay, well, I guess it's different sitting on the stage. But then, a few years later, at the end of Slava's last tour, we played as an encore Tchaikovsky's melodrama from Snow Maiden. It's a short piece for strings by Tchaikovsky. And Slava would play it very, very slow. Jane and I were both playing at the time. So after the concert, we got together with John Hewling, and the three of us were having a beer and talking about the tour and Slava's impending departure from the orchestra. This was his last tour with the orchestra. And Jane and I were complaining, the two of us, about how slow this piece had been played and how very, very difficult it was for us as string players and musicians, our souls and all that. And it was just so demanding that we would play so slowly. John kind of silent for a moment, and we turned to him and asked him, well, what about you? He's in the trombone section. And he had been sitting on stage with us. He said, well, tears were running down his face while he listened to this Snow Maiden. And he was thinking, we aren't going to have someone like this all the time with the orchestra, because this is such heartfelt music making, and he could sense Slava's soul in the music making. Jane and I both looked at each other, So there was a real difference for the physical playing the concert with Slava and the soul that he would somehow bring to this music. And I think that's true of of Slava in so many different ways. And he put it rather well once in a lesson. I heard him working with a student. And he said to the student, I never worry when I look out, if I'm playing the cello, I never worry if I look out into the hall and I see people looking at their watch or their attention wandering, because I know through the music, I have the leash, I can bring them back immediately as soon as I need to have their attention. And I think that was a thread that ran throughout his music making. He made a connection with audiences, and he made a connection with the orchestra. I would say the soul of the orchestra.